I remember one thing very fondly. I was 10 years old and I remember my dad pulling me towards the sofa. My mother was next to him and he said, see, we realize that you are naturally gifted with music and we'd like to encourage you to the extent that if you want to stop everything else and get into music, we are willing to do that. Coming from a middle income family, we weren't exactly super rich, but I mean, I'm just saying I was the only child for a long, long time at the age of 10 that you can do whatever you want. You want to get into something like music. None of them. And they said, look, we don't have any background in music. So we really don't know how to guide you, but we are willing to do the research along with you. So if you want, we can proceed right away and see.
Welcome to another session of My First Job, the podcast. We've navigated through 25 episodes, each one a different persona, a different character, a different career. And today is no different. We have a wonderful, melodious person waiting in the wings. Surajit Guha, who pursued a career in sales and training and banking, has for the last decade devoted himself to professional singing. He regales audiences across the globe on stage. That has become his current career. But getting to that has been a different set of circumstances altogether. So let's bring Surajit on stage and talk to him about how his career evolved. Hi, Surajit. Such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Atma Namaste. Howdy.
Yeah, it's great to see you because I've normally seen you on stage and clapped from the audience while listening to one of those lovely hymn numbers that you belted out with such ease. Just tell me, is there routine that you have before you come on stage? What is it that you're doing just before you get there?
Few moments of madness, I would imagine. Always. And those anxious moments before you begin. Nothing to do with stage fright, more to do with being prepared, your sound checks, and seeing that things are put up and ensuring that only people who I depend upon for helping me set up are around and not people who will take my mind off what's about to happen. Just as you mentioned that, the same thing is equally relevant after the program gets over. It's usually quite hellish because you have to, pick up the broken pieces. You've got to, get your gear together and you always don't have your assistant around. So, these are the things. But it's always highly energizing kind of an atmosphere when
You have an unusual born in Kolkata, but you've lived in Chennai most of your life. So, how has it been with your native place? I mean, a lot of us do have, careers and lives which are different. But in your case, how has the transition been? And have you always maintained close connect with Kolkata?
Yes, of course. I mean, you see, the first 6 years of my life, I was born in November 1963. And I was born in a city which was very, very traditional and very exciting. I remember my childhood memories are very, very vivid, unlike many. I remember things as early as when I was about a couple of years old or even earlier. Impressions, incidents. So that's why I think even though I moved fairly early in life from Kolkata, because my father's, you know, career took him outside of Kolkata. And Kolkata was, at that point of time going through some difficult times, with the Naxalite movement and all that kind of thing. And so we got out of Kolkata. And after a brief stint my father had in Delhi to learn up his new job, he proceeded to Chennai and erstwhile Madras. I still consider myself to be from Madras rather than from Chennai. I relate to Madras because I came in at a time when Madras was very quiet, very beautiful, and I found that people were so helpful and nice. And even till today, I think is one of the most peaceful places to live in this country.
Yeah.
And although I love Kolkata with all my heart, and I look forward to visits there because I'm a collector of music, and I have been so from a very early age. And good food, Bengali food, still finds a very large part in my heart. But and nevertheless, Chennai or Madras is where I consider to be my home. I have a lot of love for Madras, and I will not have anybody say anything ill about Madras.
That's true. I mean, Chennai is one place, Madras is one place that really grows on you. It's not one of those places that, instantly seems to, because of the climate, it's not one of those places that instantly seems to find favor, unlike a Bangalore or some of the other places in India. But so, what were the things that, sort of defined you early on? You went to school, singing was always a part of it. How did it receive? What were the things that happened?
I started singing at the age of 2.5,
Okay.
and and even when I was 2.5, they tried to take me to music school, and they rejected me, saying that you don't get to sing before the age of if you don't get your voice before the age of 5, and I was very disappointed. So when I was leaving, the premises, the headmistress of that rather reputed school in Kolkata, at that point of time it was called Surajit. She called me back and said, "Koka at a gan gao. Why don't you sing a song for me, little one?" And I sang a cover version of Rabindra Sangeet Singer. And she was so impressed that she took me in to the school immediately. And the only thing is, I found it very boring to sit with our 5-year-olds because I felt that they were very kiddish songs. Yeah. I would run away to, run off to the higher class, classes where the teenagers were, and I would sit listening to their classical music, and I had to be dragged back and said, "This is not your class." So anyway, that was a little part of Kolkata where I got my grooming into music, and of course, my my parents could sing. My grandmothers could sing very well. None of them are professional, but they were very encouraging. I mean, and unlike many other kids who had to be cajoled to bring out their talent, showcase their talents in front of friends and family, I had to be asked to stop because I was so much into music. I love music so much that I it wasn't I didn't require any great encouragement to start off.
Right.
It was- I had a great set of parents who encouraged me right through to follow my heart, whatever be my interest.
That is actually one of the most important things that you find, that parents who are willing to let their children experiment and not put constraints on them or burden them with a certain set of expectations. The children invariably seem to do a lot better when they are allowed to bloom and
Experiment.
take risks. Yeah, experiment.
I mean, whether they find worldly success or not, that's a different story. But I think they're happier. I mean, exactly. Because my parents were so, I'm not saying that they were lenient or that I was spoiled. Not at all. Never spoiled me. But, they were very broad minded. Their value systems were very, very, very much in place. And I felt that I could approach them for just about anything. I never had the need to hide anything from them. And because they were so open and accepting if I thought differently,
Hmm.
that it encouraged me a lot. And I'm blessed that I've had that kind of a family. Not just my parents, even my grandparents from both sides were extremely, open minded and fostered, whatever interests you had in mind, encouraged. So that went a long way, I think, giving me kind of solace where the rest of society was probably far more exacting about what you should become. I mean, they would ask me, "So, do you want to become an engineer like your father, or get into railways like both your grandparents, or do you want to become a
Right.
doctor?" And I would say, as early as the age of 4, "Are you kidding me? I want to become a pilot. I want to sing." So, I mean, those two things were very much in my mind, from a very early age. And I didn't care what other people, my relatives thought, what my parents, family, friends thought of my career, or it did never matter to me because I knew that my parents were there to back me up.
Yeah.
I had a mind of my own.
So the singing continued right through school and college. You were part of every single.
Absolutely. Not only were there opportunities given to me by the school and college, but also very early when I came to Chennai, I discovered route to sing publicly quite often, and that was on that was in All India Radio Madras.
Okay.
Yeah, so again through school. School was which introduced me to radio station in Madras, and I found that the Children's Hour was a place I could walk in every Saturday. So almost virtually every month, I would walk in with my guitar. I learned the guitar a little bit, and I can't play to save my life. Now I think I must have been horrendous, but that was my go-to place. I would walk into All India Radio and I would sing a few songs and come out. Public singing began as early at the age of 8, and then television at Doordarshan Kendra, Mod World was my first break in television.
Did it at some point, did you make a rational choice and then say, I need to do something? Singing always, breaking into the profession is always a difficult task.
No, you're right.
So was that?
I remember one thing very fondly. I was 10 years old, and I remember my dad pulling me towards the sofa, living room, and my mother was next to him. And he said, "See, we realize that you are naturally gifted with music, and we'd like to encourage you to the extent that if you want to stop everything else and get into music, we are willing to do that." Coming from a middle income family, we weren't exactly super rich, but I mean, I'm just saying I was the only child for a long, long time, their only child at the age of 10, that you can do whatever you want. And you want to get into something like music. None of them. And they said, look, we don't have any background in music. So we really don't know how to guide you, but we are willing to do the research along with you. So if you want, we can proceed right away and see. So what touched me? See, I was touched at the same time. I was very foolish because at that point of time, I was, what can I say? I was immature. I didn't realize what a huge honor and gift had been bestowed upon me by my parents. Not entirely my fault, also because at that point of time, there was nothing. Yeah, of course, there was no platforms. I mean, you had a Kishore Kumar who had probably left home, Hemant Kumar who had, I mean, they were legends, and these guys, I hats off to them. And I'm thinking that I'm talking about it of not knowing what to do. Just imagine 25 or 30 years before that, what guts we would have had to take to get out and break out of the possibly against, parental wishes.
Yeah.
And here was a set of parents who were saying, do what you want and we'll help you. So we did try to go and get some guidance from an aunt of mine in Calcutta, who was the station director of All India Radio Calcutta. So I wanted to become an opera singer. But she told me that perhaps there is not so much good training out here in India at the moment. She herself was an opera singer. But she said that I would rather you take up something like Hindustani classical as a grounding. I did try that, but I was perhaps not so disciplined, and I wasn't able to pick up the interest for classical music as a grounding at that point of time. So what happened was, although I realized that music was always going to be a very big part of my life, I started thinking whether I should take up music as a serious hobby and look at a career option later if it came along, because I really didn't know how to proceed or whom to ask, how to groom myself further. And sitting in Madras, music training, I wasn't particularly interested in classical training, and
Carnatic classic. Okay.
even less so.
Okay.
So I was not able to gel with that. And I had a sort of, I was into only Western music at that point of time. And
Okay.
my enthusiasm got a little bit dampened when I found that I couldn't get into opera singing. But nevertheless, I continued performing in school and college functions. And even when college got over, that was the transition time because you didn't know what to do
Right.
on the music front. Because
Right.
you no longer had competitions, and you didn't have platforms like Saregama at that point of time. And so, what did you do? You had, you know, then a couple of people, friends of my mother, they made this little music group, and they started promoting music on a professional basis. While that was happening, obviously, I it was not a career option then; it was still a hobby. So I really didn't know how far I could go with music as a career. So I had to look at other options. So I fell back on another passion of mine from childhood, which was flying. I wanted to become a pilot. I was passionate about it. It was not just a fancy or a fantasy. I used to study, and I used to, I liked commercial aircrafts, and I didn't want to get into the armed forces. Had I gone the NCC route, I'm sure I would have perhaps been a pilot by now. But I wanted the commercial kind of route of flying, and things were very difficult those days in India.
Right.
Commercial pilots, there was only one airline, Indian Airlines. And after some time, this Vayudut came into being.
Right.
There was there were an overdose of pilots and very few jobs. There were pilots waiting in the wings for years. Nevertheless, I put my head together, a couple of friends from school and college. During the final years of college, we decided, let's go and get a scholarship. And I, in fact, topped the scholarship in terms of the interview. And I got into Madras Flying Club. And then I recall little Riley, that a friend of mine said, Surajit, flying is strictly for the birds. School friend of mine used to tease me. And then I realized that, yes, in India, when flying clubs really didn't have much money and you were a scholarship student, you didn't have too many options. So a friend of mine whose father was a pilot, very, very dear friend of mine, Fazal Amir Shah. His father, Captain K. Shah, and my father were great friends. And they said, you should, you should go to Texas. You should do your flying and all that. So we did a little bit of research on that. And then finally, I had to take a rain check because I didn't have the means of pursuing such an expensive profession, which had very little guarantees if you came back to India. So regret. And see, now my college was over. I was 1 year into flying, and I decided that it's not working out. The scholarship is also not leading me anywhere. I'm not getting my flying hours here. I don't have the means to fly overseas.
But you learned to fly for a year. For 1 year, you went with it. Okay. I'll just a couple of comments which have come up, because I think you can see it. I think it's more of a comment rather than the thing. And Murli also says that, which I think has definitely touched people, amazing parents, because I think just saying that would have ensured that you were far more practical about it, rather than telling you couldn't have it, you shouldn't be doing it, which would have brought out the rebel in you. In most cases, that's the reason why.
And my parents were genuinely interested in seeing that I pursue my career either in flying or in music or in both, because they were not opposed to either. It's just that they realized that there were stumbling blocks. They were observing things, and they were supportive. I mean, so it's not as if they say, "Hey, we knew all along, and we didn't want to chat." No, not at all. I think they were as hopeful and as anticipating and as positive as I was. And it's just that naturally things came to a sort of standstill. So, which led me to the next level as to what do I do? See, ultimately, you finish college and you're heading for almost a year when you're through with college, and you are now answerable to yourself if nobody else. What do you do?
Right.
So, I was very sure about one thing. See, right through school, like now, to give you another background, I was never into mathematics or sciences. I was always an art student. I know. But during school, there were very few options. You had to take mathematics or sciences, and at the high school level, at least commerce. I thoroughly detested all of them, and I still do. So the A plus B the whole squared joke is very very relevant to me also. Because I said, what on earth have I learned? I mean, which is relevant. I mean, I'm sure in some weird and wonderful laboratory, all this may come into some use. But I see the relevance. In some way, I was also logical in my thinking. And I said, what am I doing learning algebra? What am I doing learning how to dissect frogs? I mean, this is not me. But I didn't have a chance. So they said, oh, you've joined the wrong stream. I said, then pray tell me which stream I should join. You should have joined com. I hate that. I hate accountancy. I don't understand it. Till I finished high school, I honorably failed many times in mathematics and got a big zero. And nobody in my family chided me for it or made me feel small. And for that,
That's wonderful. That's actually one of the things that I think is really wrong to do.
I feel depressed because I would really try. It was not that I would be apathetical towards things. I was serious. I was a serious minded guy. So it's not that, and it was frustrating for me because I was really trying to do something and everybody else was getting it and I wasn't. It's not as if I was not intelligent, but it was just that that was not my subject.
That is not what you were interested in.
And then after school, and during school, I realized I was pathetic in sports. I was into music. People used to say, "Oh, he sings." In college, it was, "Oh, wow," you said. So there was a so college that wing that, which I say, thank God, I never wanted to become an English teacher at the end of it. No way. I found myself enjoying 3 years, and I had college gave me the freedom of doing something where I felt that I was finally finding my feet. Even today, whatever I've learned in phonetics, crystal clear. I mean, I have a lot of admiration for my teachers because I felt I was so grateful that I was in an environment which I could relate to. Eventually got a first class with distinction in college, and I was so happy being part of college. And that gave me a lot of self-confidence, which I guess I didn't have in school, which was nobody's fault, but it was just the education at that.
Because the whole process of exploration, which is what you've outlined so brilliantly, which is whether it was flying or whether it's understanding very clearly that these subjects are great, but they're not for me.
They're not.
What is it that, yeah, and what is it that I want to do? So, how did you finally get into training or as one of
Easy, anything. So, like now it went back to the thing as to what do I do after college?
Okay.
MA literature, pass. MBA, which was becoming the new darling. Sorry. IT, which was again becoming the new darling. All these were, options which were coveted, which were respected, which was finding a lot of respect. And people expected you to do that. Not my parents, but I'm just saying society at large, friends, peers, everybody, your teachers. Some of, so it was then becoming a little difficult for me to find out as to what do I do? Do I do higher education? Then I said, enough of beating myself up doing things which I don't want to do. So let me try and get a job. Now, that was easier said than done because even those days, it was not adequate if you just had a graduation in order to get a job. So I looked at the kind of jobs which would accept me. And I looked at sales. I had no idea what it would entail. I had no idea whether I would fit in. But I did know that I was told that you needed to have reasonably good communication skills. What that breakup was, I had no idea till I got it. What I what I discovered was that it was a welcome entry into something which gave me a lot of confidence. I was an introvert when I was a kid because I was the only child and I was not very sure of how to mingle with everybody else. I was a perfectionist. I was creative. I was idealistic. I still am, I think. Traditional by nature and yet rebellious, when my value systems are at stake. So I was all of this and I still am. I think all these values, all these, your basic nature seldom changes. You just learn how to cope with it better as you go along sometimes. But then in sales, I found that I was given an opportunity to come out of my shell. I was meeting customers. I had some targets. I had to meet people. I had to, you know, go across and talk to many people and see how they accepted me. And I found, strangely enough, that I was doing rather well in that, And I'm not saying that there weren't better performers. Of course there were, but I felt that this was a very important step for me to find my feet, get self confidence. And I'm eternally grateful to the sales career for having given me that kind of, insight. So for a couple of years, I worked with a wonderful company, very respected company at that point of time called Gestetner. And I still have some very, very dear friends and colleagues from my very first job who I'm in touch with every day. So that gave me a
Engineering products, Gestitna is into.
they were into duplicating machines.
Okay. Okay.
So, cyclostyling machines. So that was their forte then. And they were the first manufacturer and the best in their field with duplicators. But of course, it phased out. And I also was, I realized that initially, although it gave me what I'm very grateful for to all my jobs is that however long or short I've had as a stint in each of them, the experiences have been really wonderful. I mean, it's something I would treasure. And I have a lot of takeaways. So Gestetna, I was with them for about a couple of years. Then I began to realize that, the company also was losing ground because 4.5 years were coming into the market. And we were being eased out, slowly, but very slowly. Yeah. And then, wham, suddenly I got this opportunity. ANZ Bank in Australia was getting into a partnership with a cultural exchange organization, usually meant for youngsters, in school and college, called American Field Service or AFS. And they did a partnership and they wanted to bring their own employees from Grindlays, India, which they'd just acquired, to work in Australia and in the ANZ Bank, have an exposure of a different country and live with Aussie families. They first threw this open to, employees of Grindlays. But I don't think it went very well with the employees because they wanted their own little independence and all that. So when the thing was almost falling through, then ANZ and AFS came to an understanding and they said, look, let's throw it open to the Indian public. And I got the wind of it. And I was one of the lucky four, very lucky four, to be selected with a non-banking background. There's another very dear friend of mine called Ramesh Raja. Two of us from Madras who was selected.
Okay.
One from Calcutta, Vishal Suri, and Rajiv from Delhi. Four of us. We went to Australia, and the deal was that we would work with various departments of the bank. We would be paid a small stipend, and we would live with Aussie families. Everything would be sponsored. To and fro travel, travel within Melbourne. And oh my God, you've heard of Yudhishthir. His feet never left the ground. I felt like Yudhishthir for more than the year, even when I came back to India after the year, because there was no strings attached. We weren't supposed to get any jobs. They said, see, we'll give you this opportunity, but you come back and you fend for yourself. Okay. What did happen was it was a fabulous experience. Not just the fact that we had a wonderful time, we were getting to see another culture, but it was a great learning experience, because we had seen Indian culture, work culture, and we got back to the Indian work culture again. And we realized that how different the Australian culture was in terms of work and even with people. We're very casual. They were very casual. very informal. At the same time, it's not as if work didn't get done. Of course, it got done. When it was the reporting, it was very, very serious about that. But
Right.
can you imagine asking your boss's boss, Bernie, you're going up to the cafeteria. Why don't you give me a sandwich? Imagine your office peon telling that. And here in Australia, he was an office assistant. He was, Bernie, please get me a sandwich. Oh, Bernie. And he was a senior manager there, about 4 levels more than this office assistant. And he would smile and get everybody, everything. He would get a big tokery and come back in a basket and hand over the change. Now, this was something which this was just not meant for me because I wasn't, an exchange, visitor, and they were giving me any special treatment. This is what was happening right through.
Right.
So that was something which I found very strange and wonderful. In fact, I felt that it made it so much easier to have that human equation. And you would go around, when you were traveling by tram in Australia, you would find a guy in this dungarees or overalls, obviously a painter or some kind of a worker. He would be sitting next to somebody who obviously look like top management, because the top management, they take public transport. They don't always take their cars to work. They would be animatedly talking about some religion or politics or something or the other, and then say, "All right, my good day to you," and walk away. So I used to find this amazing, and I lost my shyness. I completely, as it is, sales and marketing gave me a little bit of courage and confidence. This just took away any inhibitions which I had, and I'm so grateful for that 1 year, because it changed me. And I realized that when I came back to India, the things were not going to be what it was in Australia. Well, I didn't realize that. I came back starry-eyed. After about 3 months, I dropped that.
Back to it.
Back to the. But then it was not. It was not a bitter experience at all. It was just different. But it gave me a lot of resilience. It gave me a lot of strength of mind, because I realized that I understood a different set of values there, and I took the best from that culture also. And that has stayed with me. And that is so much, part of who I intrinsically am, that I'm extremely grateful for that 1 year and the cascading effect it has had over my life, and held me in good stead. My value system and the way you treat people, fair play was something which is very good. So that's was something to check out. Yeah.
One more comment, which is basically that I think sharing your story with such honesty, because that I think is part of what makes you who you are. Now, how did you get into the training aspect of?
So, fag end of my stint with Australia, suddenly the top management realized in Australia that we were coming back without a job. Okay, generous enough to offer us a, a a training position, not training position, not as a trainer, in the sense as a management trainee in Grindlays Bank, if we chose to join them,
Okay.
which was so generous of them. And usually, the IIMs, XLRI, Bajaj, these are the candidates who got into a management trainee kind of a portfolio, kind of a career with Grindlays Bank. And here we were with our respective graduation degrees, walking in to an organization which was very traditional, very different from ANZ, Australia, very process oriented. And you had to mind your P's and Q's. They were wonderful people, but it was very process oriented. And so it was a culture shock once again, getting into something where it was huge. We were overwhelmed. I definitely was overwhelmed, because this was an opportunity of a lifetime. And I spent almost 4 years in various capacities and operations, banking operations, in deposits department, and I was in credit cards. I was in sales and marketing there also. So I spent some, varied amount of times with ANZ Bank and with Grindlays Bank, and some of my colleagues are, still in touch with me and are wonderful people. But then, there was a part of me which kept tugging away, saying that this is too process oriented for me. I wasn't the right fit. So even though hats off and a lot of gratitude for people who so graciously gave me a job in Windlays and the opportunity that ANZ gave me. And I'll forever be grateful to them. But there was a part of me which kept gnawing and saying that this is not you, this is not you. And I had a friend of mine who was in NIIT. And for some reason, I was part of his, colleagues, his group, and they welcomed me in. And before I could think twice, I had said yes to a job opportunity with NIIT, a brand new wing of theirs called NIS, National Institute of Sales. They were looking for people in business development. And I said, hey, this seems interesting. And by then I had come to hobnob with middle to senior management at NIIT, a kind of window, because NIIT was also a very entrepreneurial kind of an organization. And, a lot of their top management were very casual and very friendly and very open. And in the initial stages, we had a lot of access to them, which usually happens in a startup kind of an environment. I was very lucky. And so when NIS came up, I, said, this seems to be something which is very close to it. And I interviewed for them. And they said, hey, you've already had, a few years of sales background. Even in your banking, you've done sales, be it credit cards or being in deposits, you've done sales. Would you like to consider a stint in training? I said, I've never trained in my life. And I remember the bad old days in college when I was so scared of even facing any kind of a presentation or, giving any presentation. I was tongue tied. I didn't know how to present myself at all. An interview like this, God forbid. So, I mean, but this, why don't you try? I said, all right, that we give it a shot. And I did. And for some reason, they liked me. And they said, we'll offer you a job. And there began one of my most intensive roles of learning to be a trainer. And I had the best teachers. Dr. Dhruvnath, I remember with a lot of gratitude and affection, he headed NIS. It was his brainchild. And there were wonderful people in the training department. They honed us together. And I was so well. I mean, I found my calling in terms of a corporate life. This was the first job where my heart sang. And I was learning how to train youngsters, who were first in their career, who were trying out sales and marketing as a career, because there was no course in sales and marketing. I mean, it was just that you tried your luck, and if you were successful, you were successful. Otherwise, you got out of the job. But here was a course. So on one hand, I was training youngsters, college students, or young professionals, and then also getting into corporate training, little by little, and then into behavioral management. And that's when I realized what an incredible organization I had entered into. Not only did I have absolutely wonderful colleagues and who shaped me, who, put up with me, and who also gave me such opportunities to, to grow, that I'm incredibly grateful to NIS, which later on became NIS Sparta. And I was with them for 8 long years.
So, can you tell me a couple of, let's say, training incidents that happened which kind of defined or, brought you into what is it that helps people get better at what they do?
See, first of all, I myself have, when I realized that I was a slow learner in perhaps mathematics or sciences, that gave me a lot of, understanding of what students went through, especially when they were trying to come out of their shell. There were people who were coming from the Northeast, for instance, who could barely speak in English, and they were very tongue tied. And there were a lot of people from all walks of life who came in. I realized not so much for a sales career, but as a personality development program. And a lot of students were pushed onto me because apparently, although I might be otherwise an impatient guy, but as far as training was concerned, I was extremely patient with slow learners. And because I realized that I've gone through the same experience myself. So with kids' gloves, I would train them and give them opportunities. There was a guy who couldn't express himself at all. And but I realized that he was coming from the Northeast, and he had a lot of exciting stories to tell. I made him give a presentation before all our faculty members, and for 2 hours, he held us spellbound. He was never the same. So that, when I saw that it was making a difference in the lives of students, and I would get myself very deeply entrenched into student activities to see how I could, possibly get some of them to come out of their shells. And there were some very, very good students also who were, intrinsically good, and they were willing to, go the extra mile. And together, I think we formed a community which was not just an institution. It was a family. It was very closely guarded by both the employees and the students who were part of that community. We are very close. So we worked so closely, and I think that we grew. I mean, we helped each other grow. Not only,
Which is usually the case that when you're in an organization that is nurturing, everyone tends to grow. It's not just the organization itself, but the team acquires its own set
you
of.
got a person like, and the managing director was Rajendra Singh Pawar, a guy, hats off to him. I mean, I have so much of admiration and love for the gentleman. I mean, when he would come to every center and address and explain to people what the I in NIIT meant. And his visions, his values, coming from the horse's mouth and done with so much of honesty, integrity, and simplicity. It was enduring. So for me, that organization, its customers who were our students or even our corporate clients, it was magical for me. It was magical. I have so much of love and respect and gratitude for the kind of stint I had with them. So I was with them for 8 years, and I'm sure that given a chance, I would have retired with them. But then, as many organizations, it happens to many organizations that somehow their paths change, their focuses change, and I was seeing that the old guard was moving away. The what we stood for was no longer in vogue. So slowly, I realized that the charm which it had, it was losing that, and we would eventually lose out our business entirely, and we did. NIS, well, maybe a few years before it actually closed shop, I did get out, and I did a short stint of training development for an organization, and that was when I got a calling from ING Life Insurance, which was the
Okay.
next phase of my career.
Okay. So each one of these places, it's almost as if that there's a certain amount of providence where just when you sort of got across at one point and then you were at a loose end trying to figure out what exactly needed to be done, a certain thing fell into it's maybe in the network. It is just that that particular organization required have lost skill at that point in time. Yeah.
Of course, life happens to you.
Yeah.
It's just that you have to take the cues. Sometimes you're quick in taking those cues, and that works out. Sometimes you're afraid to get out of the status quo because the comfort zone you have, you're hoping that you'll be able to hold on to it for a little longer and maybe things will improve. And it takes wisdom and a lot of soul searching to come to a point when you realize when it is time for you to move on or not on. So when I moved into ING, for instance, again, the first 4 years were absolutely wonderful because I was getting into something where it was like a startup. And startups have always held the charm for me because I was creative in nature. And when you have the right kind of boss, I remember my with a lot of affection. My boss there was Mr. Anil Bhatia. He is still a very, very, very dear friend of mine. So I'm just saying that, the kind of free hand I had, and we worked shoulder to shoulder. And we literally, I mean, the sales department from his end and the kind of support I got to head the alternate channels training function, start from the scratch, build up the processes from the scratch, hire trainers from the scratch, build training programs, not just what was provided in terms of the products, but also to, to nurture skills amongst the employees. Now the initial stage of my stint with ING, I got all of that. A free hand, had some amazing, amazing colleagues. And yeah, like I said, I mean, we were finding feet. We were in a small little building, and then we migrated to a bigger, big building until we had a huge, you know, building on MG Road in Bangalore. And that's where we found our feet as a corporate and entity and all that. And that's when we proliferated more.
So during all these stints of training, was singing a part of what you were known for at all these places as well?
Yes. In fact,
Okay.
my first boss, Anil, he was wonderful. I mean, he was very encouraging. I mean, so what did happen in those interim years was I managed to keep singing for groups, professional, semi-professional groups locally. And then there was some talent scouts from Bombay who started performing here in Chennai. They migrated me to Bombay and I started performing for them in Bombay. So initially with lower level of success, but then I quickly understood that Bombay, once the market opened up, it could be something else. And after 2007 or 8, it really started booming for me. And at one point, I found that I was making virtually as much money for music as I was in my corporate career. But then again, you wanted the best of both worlds because you were performing in the weekends and you were working during the weekdays.
Yeah. I mean, talk about doing exactly what you like doing during weekends and being paid well
But
for that.
it is because I pulled on my health also because, I honestly did not like Bangalore as a city. I was quite miserable as a city. I didn't find roots, though I was there for at least 6.5 years. I didn't find my roots in Bangalore at all. I'm not blaming anybody. It's just that uh, I wasn't I was not eating well. I was not looking after myself so well, and I was not too happy. So I would run back to Chennai every weekend, or fly to Bombay or Gujarat or someplace, if I got a chance to. I, in fact, had a chat with one of my subsequent bosses, again, a wonderful gentleman called Sanjeev. I told him, boss, at one point of time, I might head the music way. But as of now, I plan to pursue both music and training here. Let me know if that's okay with you. Because if it's not, if it's going to clash, let me know. I'll get out. But I don't want to. I think you guys are great, and I would like to be with you as long as possible. But the weekends, I would like them to be mine. Is that okay?
Hmm.
And he was gracious and he thought for a moment. I said, go ahead. So And so that was like an official go ahead, which I'm saying that, I'm eternally grateful to these people for being so helpful in my career. So 5, 6 years were absolutely wonderful. And I got the amusement of my father, I got a long-term service award after 5 years in ING. My father by then had finished about 40 years of service in the same company.
Very different.
He was old school. And anyway, so then what happened was, although I loved training and there was change in my role. And then all of a sudden, I found myself again straitjacketed into processes which were very straitjacketed. There was no leeway. I had no control over a few things, and I would be still held responsible for things I had no control over. For instance, you were told to be responsible for the performance of of the sales team, whereas it was always not possible to insist that they remained in the training because they had some pressures and they would be taken out. So after some time, I realized that this was not just this company, but the industry at large. And then I found myself becoming slowly more and more of a headmaster for other trainers. And my own involvement in taking training other than product training was coming to a standstill. And being creative by nature, that began to hurt me because I felt that, is this what I really is what I signed up for?
Right.
So, like I said, it's absolutely nobody's fault. I mean, it's just that sometimes you find yourself completely in alignment with the company, the same company, and then finally, you find that focuses of the organization is changing because of business reasons.
Realities, yeah.
And yeah, realities, and it's nobody's fault. It's just that you find yourself becoming non-aligned to that. What do you do? So sometimes you embrace status quo and you hang on to status quo and you hope that things will change. And then no matter what you do, things don't change. The writing's on a wall. But you still don't want it because you don't. It's like, it's like not accepting that maybe this is not.
Yeah, unwilling to accept that certain things have changed. Okay, so you're saying then that what you've arrived at now, the happy place that you're in right now, which is singing, was a gradual process, or was it one of those?
The year which I left the company, I had taken a overall decision that year would be my breakaway year.
Okay.
I had still not, solidified on the date, but I had made up my mind and I told my management that I think this year I would look out for a change. I would not join any competition, but I would be pursuing my music, which I've been trying to do for a long time. Maybe I didn't take myself seriously and maybe they didn't take me very seriously. But one day I found that a colleague of mine who I was very close to said, "This is my last day." I said, you can't do that to me. How dare you leave just like that? That was like a kick in the pants for me.
Okay.
Overnight, I took a decision. What if? Now, I had enough of leave with me. I took a split decision, and the next morning, with a singing heart, I wrote a polite and fond resignation letter saying that I think I've finally found my feet and I know what I want to pursue now. I've had a wonderful 8 year stint with this organization. You've put me into so many different situations and I'm ever grateful for that. But I think I've come to a decision that this is the time I would like to give notice. The head of training was shocked. I mean, he was a newcomer and he said, "Are you leaving because of me?" I said, "No, at all. I don't even know you." And certainly not. Absolutely. Then he had a quick meeting with about 400 trainers and said, "Surajit, he was a very senior guy. He's leaving. I'm going to stop him." So one of my colleagues told him, "Have you heard him sing?" He said, if you hear him sing, you let him go. I'm telling you something, Venugopal. I mean, the day I took that decision was the happiest day of my life. Not because it was a relief to get away from something, not at all. Ev- I, I wouldn't take away a single moment from any of the organizations. And I can't stop singing the praises of all my colleagues, all the organizations who've given me such a wonderful experience. But it is because of them that they helped me come to a decision which was so natural that now, even if there is, a month without business, it doesn't shake me, it doesn't rattle me, because leap of faith which finally happened was a natural process. I I went into it with confidence, with absolute self-reliance that I was doing the right thing. It was not out of frustration. It was not out of desperation. It was like an opening, a door opening, and I saw it, and I knew the system. And every minute ever since, I've been ever so happy, ever so happy.
Wonderful, Surajit. It's been an hour, and this must be one of those few interviews or programs where you have not sung a single bit. Closing thoughts, and then maybe we'll close out on a song before you leave.
Yeah. So my closing thoughts is, if I were to look at what I would do differently if I were to start all over again. See, it's very easy to be a glib talker at when you've had 35 years of experience and say, I would have done this differently. At that point of time, you really don't know. Sometimes life puts you through those entanglements because you need to figure out.
Right.
What I have figured out, though, is that when life comes across to you and hits at you, there are times we're going to have every life has had its share of challenges.
Right.
But you know that the only time when you need to change is if you feel that cold fear of not having done your homework and you're going to be punished in school. That is the time when you know that
This is not what you need to do. Right.
you need to do that. And if you don't, you're inviting punishment, more punishment, which is unwarranted. Life is not a punishment. Life is giving you opportunities to look at different things and try them for yourself. Some of them you're going to like, some of them you're going to walk away from, and no harm done. You don't have to beat yourself up about it. It's just that you gracefully leave. And now, today, that grace has been thanks to everybody in my life, every colleague, every friend, my parents who, gave me that boost to start with. So today, I think that don't be afraid to explore. Where you begin with something, don't be afraid to explore, even if it's something not your cup of tea. Look at it. And if it doesn't work out and you find that you're not really happy with it, then ask yourself, really, what is it that you really want? What is it that make you need to ask yourself that? Because if you don't invest that amount of time, you are not going to leave one job and get into another job. It'll be a very temporary feeling of relief that you got into another job.
Yeah.
If you do not know why you're leaving or what you really want now, you're going to repeat any
Same.
unhappiness that you've ever experienced again and again. But at some stage, ask yourself, what is it that you really want? And if you don't have it with you, build on it. One day when you're ready, you hit that.
Yeah.
And you're ready.
Okay. So, a couple of lines to bid goodbye.
Okay. Do you mind if I have a little bit of accompaniment?
Please.
Okay. Just a couple of lines. I don't think the audience will tolerate me for more.
No, they'd be glad to, but I think they'd love to see you on stage.
All right, let's see.
rather than just.
You're most welcome. I mean, those who are watching this program, I'm so grateful that you've joined in and tuned into our program. It might have some of it might have made some relevance to you. Maybe you've had some similar experiences, and that I think this. I'm very grateful to this organization for giving me this platform because it allows you to really share. And I think many of us feel at the end of the day that even though we have had various checkered careers or wonderful careers, there are a lot of commonalities, a lot of learnings which are similar also, and that gives you more strength. So let me close with a couple of lines.
Okay.
वही तू मत रुक जाना वही तू मत रुक जाना तूफान से मत घबराना कभी तो मिलेगी तेरी मंजिल दिल गगन की छाँव में वही तू मत रुक जाना.
Wow. Marvelous. What a wonderful note to end it on, Surajit. Thank you very much for taking part in this and being so honest, being so upfront, and telling us with so candidly about what you've had, how life has treated you, and what you've given back. Thank you for coming on the program.
Pleasure. Atman Mista.
That was Surajit Guha. And as you've seen, the quality of his singing is so good that he could have made those decisions very early on. But he's had such a wonderful life in all the places that he's worked in. He's brought so much of happiness to people, and he himself has been so happy as a result. So, tune in next week again. Thank you for all those people who have joined us, and you can catch this on YouTube at any time. Please do subscribe to the channel so that you keep getting updates on our this thing. And every Friday at 3 p.m. is when we hope to come back to you, or we will come back to you with a new guest, a new career journey, and more fun in the future. Thank you.